Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about 10 unknown or forgotten conflicts that went on over the last 33 years. Now the rules for this are simply they have to be relatively unknown worldwide, and the conflicts cannot be a small insurgency. They have to be pretty big conflicts. This is not a ranking video, it's more of just an overview, kind of a brief introduction for those who want to learn more, and with all of that out of the way, let's get right into it. Number 1 is the Civil War in the Central African Republic. Now this war has been going on for the last 10 years, and it started due to an Islamic coalition wanting to overthrow the president. And they wanted to overthrow him because he rigged the 2011 elections. And so the war began. The next year, it would evolve into a religious war. When that president stepped down, he was replaced with a Muslim leader. However, the country was majority Christian, and so a Christian coalition was formed, and so both sides fought for the next 7 years. Then in 2020, the conflict escalated again when the former president returned to politics and was immediately accused of starting a coup. And so for the last 2 years, it's been forces loyal to the former president versus forces loyal to the United Nations recognized leader. But so far, the conflict has killed over 5,000 people, and nations such as Chad, France, Rwanda, and even Russia all have sent armies to have a stake in the war. I would highly recommend History with Hilbert's video as he goes much deeper into this. I'm just giving the overview, like I said. Credits to him for actually explaining this. He was my main source for learning about this, so much credit to him. Number 2 is the insurgency in northeastern India. Now this conflict has been going on for as long as India has had independence, but over the last 30 years, it's gotten a lot more violent. Now I want to say first, it is an extremely complicated situation, so please do not take my word right now as an absolute truth. I will be making another video on this in the future, I don't know when. Anyways, India is a country of over 2,000 ethnicities and cultures. So in northeast India, which is nearly completely removed geography and culturally from the rest of India, an ethnic conflict started between the peoples there and the majority Hindi population of India. Now, like I said, there's a lot more to understand, but from the 1980s to the early 2000s, over 18 separate rebel groups all rose up against the Indian government in the northeastern region. It hasn't been a traditional war with battles, instead it's been a war of bombings and massacres. And yes, there's been some gunfights though. Over 40,000 people have died in these conflicts, but luckily the conflict has died down over the last 15 years, but it is still a major threat. Outside of India, the conflict has spilled over into Bhutan, Myanmar, and even China. Number 3, the Liberian Civil War. Now I want to say my next video will be about this, so subscribe for that. But the Liberian Civil War started in 1989 when a man named Charles Taylor started a rebel army to overthrow the Liberian president Samuel Doe, which himself only got power by overthrowing the previous president. Now the Liberian Civil War is split into 2 separate civil wars. They're kind of intertwined, but I mean they're still different technically. The first civil war was when Charles Taylor was taking power from 1989 to 1996, and the second one was when Charles was losing power, which was from 1999 to 2003. And basically for 14 years, Liberia saw extremely brutal fighting, which personally, I think this may be the most brutal fighting since World War II. Just some of the things that happened was there were entire armies of child soldiers, including one led by a dude named General Butt Naked. And yes, that's an actual photo of him. Some of these child soldiers literally ate their dead enemies, and both sides committed human sacrifices. Outside of that, the country was in pretty much complete anarchy. I mean, yeah, there would be rebel factions holding parts of the country, but there was no central rule. And it was so bad that even the United Nations did not send peacekeepers for 3 years. No country fully participated in the war due to its brutality, and so overall 250,000 people, or a little under 12% of the entire country's population, died in the wars. And to this day, the country lives in its shadow. Number 4 is the Eritrean-Ethiopian War. In 1941, modern-day Eritrea was liberated by the British from the Italians. And for the next 19 years, it was a British protectorate till the Ethiopians annexed it in 1960. They annexed it due to Eritrea being a part of Ethiopia before the Italians arrived. However, the Eritreans did not want this, and so a over 3-decade-long war for independence began. Eventually, in 1993, Eritrea got independence, and things were rocky till 1998, when a border battle started over the disputed city of Badme. Following this, a full-out war began between both sides, and the combat during this war was described as very brutal as it devolved into trench warfare. During the war, many nations sent weapons and advisors to both sides. Some nations include China, Bulgaria, the United States, and most interestingly, Russia and Ukraine, who would both support opposing sides. Overall, nearly 100,000 people would die during the 2-year-long war, with the war ending in 2000. Since 2000, both nations have had very rocky relations since, with over 500 dying in border battles. Finally, in 2018, both nations settled their differences and have worked together in the ongoing Tigray War. Number 5 is the Cenepa War. The Cenepa Basin is a region in South America, and since the end of the also forgotten Ecuador-Peruvian War in 1941, the region has been disputed by the two countries. The region, which only has around 150 people, became the center of a border war in 1981 that killed 33. Then again in 1994, a border buildup started, resulting in an incident on January 25, 1995 that started the war. For the next month, a war in the region occurred. During the war, at least 100 were killed, though there are reports of over 400 dying. However, Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and the United States forced a ceasefire on February 28th. Since then, Ecuador and Peru have made numerous treaties to keep peace, and the region is now officially Peruvian. Number 6 is the Nepalese Civil War. If you have played Far Cry 4 and actually enjoyed it like I did, then you will find it fascinating that it was actually semi-based off a true story. In 1994, the Maoist Party of Nepal was denied entry into the Nepalese elections. Soon after this, the Maoist Party gave their demands to the Nepalese government, which was to return to politics or face a rebellion. The government denied their demands, and so the war began. For the first 5 years, it was a minor insurgency that only the police fought and a few raids. In 2001, it became a full-out war as the Maoists formed an actual army. War would go on until November 21st, 2006, under the terms that the Kingdom of Nepal would cease to exist and both sides combine together in politics. Overall, the war would kill 18,000 people. And I know that is very brief, but that's because after Liberia, I will be talking about the Nepalese Civil War, so subscribe for that if you haven't. Number 7 is the war in Abkhazia. The Abkhaz are a Circassian ethnic group in northwestern Georgia. They are linguistically and somewhat culturally different from the Russians and Georgians. During the Russian Civil War, the Abkhaz fought with the Bolsheviks against the Georgians and turned from being an independent Soviet state. And so they were until 1931, when Stalin incorporated it into the Georgian Soviet Republic to avoid ethnic violence. All was fine until 1989, when a group of local Abkhaz leaders demanded the return of the Abkhaz state. This was denied, and so riots between the Georgians and the Abkhaz started. The next year, another separatist state within Georgia called South Ossetia left Georgia, resulting in violence and then a full-out war. The war would last until June 1992 with an Ossetian victory, so Abkhazia declared full independence. Following this, a war began because the region had thousands of ethnic Georgians living within its borders, and this would later result in massacres. Volunteers from Russia, Ukraine, and Chechnya would fight for both sides. The war would go on for 14 months and kill over 25,000 people. Number 8 is Operation Just Cause. This is the only war on this list that directly involved the United States. In 1989, America was fighting a war against drug trafficking across Central and Southern America. One of the main drug traffickers in that region was a military general named Manuel Noriega. Noriega led Panama since 1983, and he actually worked with the CIA for decades until the Iran-Contra affair in 1986. After that, numerous drug agencies in America, such as the DEA, put a warrant for his arrest. However, he refused to give himself up, and so now the United States looked to depose him by force. In 1989, Panama had elections, and a Democratic coalition won. However, the coalition's goal was to have Noriega out of power. So Noriega ended the election, and now the United States had an excuse to invade. So on December 20th, 1989, they invaded with the goals of arresting Noriega and freeing political prisoners. They were successful and occupied the entire country within 4 days, except Noriega hid in an embassy to avoid arrest. Eventually, after playing 10 days of extremely loud rock music and even playing the sounds of chickens being beheaded, Noriega surrendered. And with that, the brief war ended. Over 650 people would die during the invasion, though the full numbers of civilians dead are debated. Number 9, the Albanian Civil War. This really isn't a civil war, but it technically is. From 1946 to 1990, Albania was under a radical communist regime. During this communist regime, there was very little foreign investment, and so the country quickly became the poorest in Europe. In 1990, the country started to leave communism, and so the country quickly had to adapt to a capitalist economy. The Albanian economy soon became dominated by pyramid schemes that promised better wealth for the Albanian people. The Albanian government actually endorsed these pyramid schemes, and so over 60% of the entire Albanian population invested their entire life savings into these scams. Eventually, in January of 1997, the pyramid schemes ran out of money, and then the government stopped many of the pyramid schemes from using that money, which caused them to completely collapse. And with that, many of Albania's citizens lost their life savings, and nearly all employers had zero money to pay their employees. The country then just completely fell into anarchy. Gangs would rise across the entire country and fought police and other gangs for territory. Military stockpiles were looted since there were no money to give to soldiers, and so the bases were completely abandoned. And so weapons were everywhere in Albania. Eventually, in April, Italy, Greece, France, and the United States militarily intervened. The Albanian people demanded the president to step down for this entire period, which he refused to do so. But eventually in June he did, ending the conflict. The conflict would have huge impacts on the insurgency that was going on in Kosovo, as hundreds of thousands of weapons would be given to the fighters there. Eventually this would result in the brutal Kosovo War and the war in Macedonia, which you can watch my video on. Before going on to the final one, let's go through some honorable mentions, or basically ones I was going to put on here but decided against because there was no room. First is the war in Donbass. This was the war in Ukraine before the Russian invasion, and I highly recommend Charlie Dogwood's ongoing Borderlands series because he really discusses the history of Ukraine and really the context behind this entire conflict. Second is the Tajik Civil War, which I was going to put on here, but I didn't want too many post-Soviet conflicts, and I will for sure make a video about it in the next weeks. And lastly is the Sri Lankan Civil War, which lasted 25 years and killed around 100,000 people. It is very convoluted and complicated, so it's really impossible to simplify, and I may make a video about this later on. And lastly, number 10, the Russo-Georgian War. Now, I want to say I've already made a video about this subject. It's in my South Ossetian video, but to simplify, in 1999, Georgia closed numerous Russian bases within its territory. Georgia would then also make closer ties with NATO and the EU. And lastly, Georgians allowed the Chechens, who are fighting a war against Russia, to stay within their territory till 2002. As a result of all these actions, Georgia grew away from Russia. So in turn, Russia decided to fund the South Ossetians by sending weapons. Then during a South Ossetian border clash at the start of August 2008, Russia used it as a way to fully invade Georgia. The war would only last 5 days before a ceasefire would be signed. The war would kill over 720 people, but most importantly, this was Russia's first major invasion of another country since the end of the Soviet Union, making it the most geopolitically important conflict out of all of these. And that is all. Thank you so much for watching. Now, I know this video is very fast paced, and I apologize because I really needed something out this week since I'm going on a little vacation. I don't know if it will be next week or maybe mid next week after that. I have no idea. I will return with a video diving deep into another conflict, but I will be releasing shorts every single day. I'll be releasing 2 a day, so if you want to check the channel to check those out, I mean, they're not incredible. They're not as good as the deep dive, but there's something to watch, right? Anyways, if you enjoyed, like, if you're new to the channel, bell and subscribe, and have a good day. Goodbye.